The content in this video is for educational and harm reduction purposes only. I am not encouraging or promoting the use of any illegal substances. All experiences discussed are personal stories told to share insight, reduce harm, and contribute to public understanding of psychedelics and mental health. Do not attempt to recreate anything described in this video. If you choose to use substances, always prioritize safety, legality, and informed decision making. Yo, what is up? My name is Carrie, and today we're going to talk about the 10 most common mistakes people make when they take psychedelics. And as someone who's been in the psychedelic world for about a decade, I definitely have learned some things over the years of what to do and what not to do, along with other tips that I've just gotten online and, you hear through just doing this kind of stuff. But let's go ahead and just hop into it. And the first one I want to talk about is people just taking way too much for their very first time, or just taking way too much in general. This is one that is super common, especially in the shrooms world. If you go on like Reddit and stuff, you'll see people all the time that are just saying like, take an eighth, that's like the standard dose, that kind of thing. But I am definitely someone who leans on the side of take the smallest tiny possible amount, especially if it's your first time doing something, because you never really know where like potency lies with things. Shrooms has different potencies. LSD can have very wildly in potency. So especially if it's your first time, I highly recommend taking just the threshold dose, just so you can, one, see how you're going to react to it, see kind of what it's like, and then if you like it and you want to go further, then you can, up your dose later. It's always better to take a smaller amount because you can always take more, but you can never take less. You just have to ride that out. And I just want to note, especially in the LSD world, LSD is weighed in micrograms, which is most of the time when you get LSD, it's on blotter paper, and that can vary a lot, even on the same blotter, like sheet of blotter, depending on how it was done in the lab. And that can make a wild difference in how your experience goes, because you might get it from a dealer or something who's like, yo, this is 100 micrograms, or yo, this is 200 micrograms, but really it could be more, it could be less. You just never really know with this kind of thing. So yes, always try the smallest possible dose to see where you lie and how you're going to react to these kinds of things. So on to number 2. The next most common mistake I see people make is tripping in a bad environment. So if you've been around this world a lot, you'll hear the phrase set and setting is super important, especially with like hallucinogens and stuff. So your set and setting, so where you are, how your brain is, like what kind of mood you're in, where you are in life. If you're in a good place, that is, super important. Like if you are in a bad environment and you're not in a good place in life, definitely do not do it. Even if just one of these are off, that can really spiral a trip into a bad place. So something I personally like to do whenever I do psychedelics is I actually will go through and clean up where I'm at, especially if I'm doing it in like my house. Like if I'm doing it at home, I will highly do that. But sometimes that's hard to do, especially if you're over at like a buddy's house or something. You might maybe suggest it to them because it can definitely help. But this is something I do every single time that I do it. Also, another thing about bad environments is a lot of people would do things like acid and shrooms and then go to like a house party or like go to a rave. This is something some people can handle, some people like it. I personally am not that person. I've done it before. It's not my favorite way to do this kind of thing. I personally prefer to do these things in a chill environment, usually inside my room or inside a house or a friend's house, or sometimes like out in nature can be cool, as long as that is a safe environment. You don't want to be somewhere where you're going to be worried about like cops showing up and like, that kind of thing. So yeah, number 2, that is definitely another very important thing to keep in mind. So number 3 on common mistakes that people make is tripping around the wrong people. And this can really affect how a trip goes, because especially when you're on hallucinogens and stuff, you feed off of the people around you. So like people might be talking about something, you're gonna feed off of those energies that they're talking about, or if they just give off like a weird vibe, you're gonna feed off of that. It can make your anxiety shoot up, it can make you uncomfortable, and it can really taint where your trip goes. I personally prefer to keep groups small if I'm doing this in a group. I've done it in like big party environments, I've done it in larger groups. It gets chaotic, it gets not as fun as it would be. Also got to keep in mind like how well you know the people that you're with. Like sometimes tripping with strangers can work. I've done it before. I've tripped with people that I've met for the very first time that night, and we're at a trip together, and it's been fine. That is completely possible. but definitely risky, because you don't know who this person is, you don't know what their personality is, you don't know if you're gonna like them. You might like them when you initially meet them, and then you see things come out of their character during a trip where it makes you uncomfortable. And yeah, so just be very weary about the people that you're around. And there might even be people that you like. I know I definitely know plenty of people like this, like where I can handle them in small doses. Like, you know, you can hang out with them like a few hours and then you're kind of done with them. You kind of want to, you know, get away from them. So be cautious, especially with things like LSD where the trip lasts like 12 hours. So, you know, if it's someone that you can kind of handle being around, probably don't do it with that person. But it could also go the other way, where you see things in their character that you did not see before that makes you appreciate them more. You just have to be really wary on these kinds of people. So just keep that kind of thing in mind. So number 4 on a common mistake that people do when going into these trips is going in when they're not in a good place. This kind of falls back into what I was saying before about not having a good set and setting, like where you are in life, where's your mental state. And yeah, going into a trip when you're already stressing about maybe something at school, or maybe something just personal going on in your life. Did you just have a breakup? Are you just kind of like depressed? So people go through just random depression kind of moments all the time. You know, just think about where your mental state already is, and you know how that's going to affect how the trip goes. Because going in when you're already in a bad state is generally not going to be a good idea. There are some people that can go in when they've been kind of like in a bit of a gloomy state in general, and they go in with intentions of trying to figure out what is going on. And sometimes that can work, but you should be aware that that is risky. Things are going to come up that you've been thinking about, things that you don't even know that you've been thinking about, but you've been subconsciously thinking about. All of that stuff is going to come forward, and yeah, you definitely want to have, you know, a clear head, be in a good space when you go into this stuff, because especially if you're already anxious, like if you're a really anxious person and then you go into like a trip and you get that come up anxiety mixed with you already being anxious about other things, that can just catapult you into a horrible experience. So yeah, keep that kind of thing in mind. So number 5 on the common mistakes that people make is eating too much or eating too soon before a trip. So with this one, it's just a simple little, you know, make sure you're not, you know, overloaded. Go in comfortable, like definitely go in not starving. I mean, some people do fast. That's especially common with things like shrooms. I know a couple of my friends that used to do that. They would fast like the entire day up until the shrooms trip. I'm personally not one for wanting to do that. I would say like eat like at least probably like 2 hours before you start a trip, so that way you're not going in like super heavy, and try to keep what you're eating clean, especially things that I've noticed in my life because of like health situations and stuff. Eating clean is insane how much that affects the way your body feels, where your mind feels. I just went through a couple of years of not touching fried foods, caffeine, and anything greasy, and I recently had like some Chinese food with that was like fried, greasy, and you know all the bad stuff. And oh man, I was hung over for probably 2 days after that. When you experience something like that, you really realize how much the stuff that you're intaking into your body affects your brain and how you feel, how you move through this world. It's a simple one, but just try to go into these experiences with a clean body. Some people will even go, you know, a couple of weeks, like they'll prep for a couple of weeks on, you know, keeping a clean diet and stuff all the way up until they get to the experience. So that way they're in a really clean state when they go into this experience. So, number 6 on the list of common mistakes that people make is not having music prepared. This is kind of a simple one and kind of a personal tip that I'd like to give out, because music, especially on things like LSD, can highly influence where a trip goes. It's one of my favorite things about psychedelics is how much music influences what the experience is and what you get out of it. So especially if you're new to it, you might not know what kind of things you want to listen to while going into these kinds of states. I would recommend doing some research and looking into some bands that are good for this kind of things. You can find all kinds of lists online that are good for, you know, things to listen to while on psychedelics and stuff. If you watched my first LSD experience video, I mentioned how one of my buddies put on metal during my first trip ever, and it was just like, it was not the mood, man. So like, even if you like a specific kind of music, it still might not mesh very well with what this experience is. It might not. A lot of people experience these things differently. I know a lot of people that will listen to like rap and hip hop and stuff like that while on these experiences. That is just not me. I can get down with that music in some situations, but definitely not during like a psychedelic experience. I personally recommend really chill things, things that might be ambient. I have a huge list of bands that I could recommend, but I'm going to make another video on that down the line where I'll just talk about different bands and artists that are good for psychedelic experience. And number 7, for a common mistake that people try to make with psychedelics, is they try to control the trip. And there's a difference in trying to control the trip and trying to go into a trip with intention. When you go into a trip and you are fighting, like, one of the common things that you'll hear in the psychedelic world is that you have to let go. Not letting go when you're having like a tough experience, it's definitely easier said than done, but this truly is, when you're having a tough time, letting go is going to be the best thing you could do, because fighting it is literally just going to make things worse. And you can like kind of guide the trip. I'm not saying to just trip with no kind of plan, but like, go into a trip, maybe have like a list of some things you might want to do. I've done this a lot of times. Usually I don't ever do it. Usually once the trip starts, I just kind of roll with things and like completely forget about my list. But it's not a bad idea to kind of have some things kind of like planned out that you might want to do during the trip, but don't control it. If things don't line up with what you have planned, don't try to fight the trip, like especially if you're in like a group setting and you had like all these things planned out and you get like annoyed that people are not following what you had planned out. Just ride with it, just flow with it. Don't try to control the trip. Don't try to control where things are going. You can suggest things, you can mention things, but don't get upset or try to highly control what's going to happen. And usually this is not like a huge deal. Usually most people will just, have the trip and just ride the wave of whatever is happening. That's usually how it went for me. Like, I would have plans on what I wanted to do for these experiences, and I would completely forget about them as soon as the trip started. But number 8 is looking in the mirror. And obviously, this is one you've probably heard a lot. If you've been around the psychedelic community for a while, you definitely heard, don't look in a mirror while on psychedelics. Now, for me, this is something that doesn't bother me. I can look in the mirror while I'm like tripping. It absolutely does not bother me. But I have definitely talked to people who have done this and have gotten uncomfortable. And the reason is like, you're looking at yourself in this altered state, especially if you're having crazy visuals or something. You could be looking at yourself morph into all kinds of weird ways, and like, that can really freak you out if you see yourself in that kind of way. And this is a pretty simple one. I mean, I would say it's pretty easy to avoid mirrors while you're tripping. I think the only time ever even look in the mirror while tripping is when I'm like going to piss, I'm going to a bathroom or something. This one's easy. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, so either do it, don't do it. This is one that, it really depends on you and how you handle that kind of thing. And number 9 on the common mistakes that people make is mixing weed. So this one, oh man, I have a lot to say about this one, because for me, psychedelics almost aren't worth even doing without weed. But I would be lying if I said weed absolutely affects how strong your trip is going to be. So like for me, I would say like 99% of the times that I've done psychedelics, I have smoked weed during the trip. But I think I have 1 or 2 under my belt where I didn't. And it definitely affects where the trip goes. And something to note is, like, I usually do it right when the come up starts happening. So like right when you start feeling it is usually when I would do it. And the timing of when you do it can really affect how things go, because like say you're smoking weed during the come up and you're already kind of like anxious about the come up and you're already starting to kind of feel things. Hitting weed in that moment can absolutely catapult you into the trip like that. And it has done it to me like many times. Usually I handle it pretty well, but there have been moments where I've done it and it has put me on my ass, where I'm sitting there kind of wigging out for a minute. So definitely be aware of mixing things like weed, and especially other things, mixing any kind of substance. But like weed specifically, it's a very common one that people do with psychedelics, and it absolutely makes the trip way more intense. And it also depends on where you are in the trip, because I've had moments where you're pretty deep in the trip already, where like, you know, you're already way out there. I've had moments where I've smoked entire bowls of weed and it not affect anything. Like it even feels like you're just breathing air. Like the smoke is less harsh, and like it doesn't really affect anything because you're already so gone. So like it really depends. I would say early on in the trip, it's really going to catapult you, but if you're already pretty deep in, a lot of the times it's not going to do a ton, but sometimes it can. It really, really depends. So definitely be wary about mixing weed while you're doing these experiences. And number 10, the final common mistake that people make while doing these experiences is expecting a specific experience. So this kind of rolls back to what I was saying before about sometimes you can go into a trip with intention and you want to get something specific out of it. A lot of the times that is not what's going to happen. So there's a little bit of a phrase out there that people say is that psychedelics are going to give you the experience that you need, not the experience that you want. And sometimes the experience you need is the experience you want, but a lot of the times it is absolutely not. So I just recommend going into these experiences with no expectations and just see where it takes you. So like I was saying earlier, you can kind of go in with like a guide of things that you kind of want to do in the experience. Don't expect the experience to be euphoric or super visual or to be this super meditative state, because you just can't control those moments. Those moments naturally come and they happen when they happen. And that's the crazy thing about psychedelics, is because every experience is so different from each other. Like I've had experiences that were like super duper visual, and I've had other experiences where it's just kind of like, you know, not super visual and you're just kind of like comfortable with life and just at peace. And then I've had bad trips. Those are also a thing. So, you know, that's also a possibility. And even those can vary in how, you know, what you get out of those. That's just kind of how psychedelics work. You never know what exactly you're going to get out of it. And what you get out of it can vary on a spectrum of a ton of different things. So yeah, just go into these experiences and don't expect a specific experience. Just go in, be curious, and see where it takes you. And yeah, we're gonna call it here for this one. I kind of like to hear some of you guys' tips. If there's something you think I missed on here that you think would be important to say, leave all that stuff down in the comment. And yeah, this is just my list that I wanted to put out there. Hopefully it helps someone and you get something out of this. Yeah, we're gonna call it here for this one. If you're new to the channel, definitely like the video, hit the subscribe button. We're gonna be making a lot more videos here. I recently just started this channel back up, so we're gonna be doing a lot more coming up. I got a lot of videos planned out, but yeah, subscribe, like the video, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.